Video games are a wonderful medium. They've been a constant throughout my life. In good times and in bad, they were always there for me. Beyond the general escapism, or the fun gameplay, or the emotional stories, the truly magical thing is that they give you the ability to inhabit someone else. Whether that be an existing character or one you create for yourself, it gives you an ability to experience life in a different way, to become who you want to be, to explore who you are, to do things you could never do in your everyday life. It's an experience that cannot be replicated anywhere else. About a year ago, I started playing Final Fantasy XIV, and it was one of the best decisions of my life. When the credits finally rolled for Endwalker, the current final story arc, I was overtaken with emotion, but perhaps not for the same reasons as many others. I loved the story of the game, and the ending was an amazing conclusion to a story that had spanned nearly a decade. But the thing that I couldn't stop thinking about was how far I had come personally. I decided to play the game pretty much on a whim. I was mostly interested in getting more Nier story content, but I was apprehensive as I'd never really played an MMO before. I've had plenty of experience playing multiplayer games in my life, but generally I'm a bigger fan of single-player games. I started playing with one friend for a while, but when story content required multiple players, I opted to play with bots instead of other humans. Which, as a side note, is a fantastic feature for people like me that suffer from anxiety, and I think they should further expand on it. I was utterly terrified of playing with other players. I absolutely hated the idea of being the one person with no idea what I was doing, dragging down the experience for others. I carried on like that for a few months, terrified of each new dungeon, but simultaneously loving the game and diving into all the content I could find. I did every side quest, leveled every class, crafted and gathered a stupid amount of unique items. I got addicted to fishing, gambling, chocobo racing, pretty much everything I could do by myself. I was in love with the game, but eventually I hit the point where my AI partners were no longer an option. I was going to have to face my fears and play with strangers going forward. I had horrible anxiety over each new dungeon or trial. I began to dread each new piece of content I came across. Worried about how people would be frustrated by me, try to rush me, or get mad at me. For a while, I would watch guides over and over to prepare myself for each new piece of content, but I would often get confused and forget what I watched by the time I actually got to it. In reality, some players were frustrated by my slow pace and lack of knowledge, but most were very friendly and offered advice, or just didn't say much of anything at all. I continued on, with my pace slowing as doing new content got harder and harder for me to tolerate. Eventually, I came upon my biggest challenge yet, the Crystal Tower Alliance Raid series. Alliance Raids are similar to dungeons, but rather than having 4 players, there are 24, which in my eyes was an extra 20 people that I had to worry about watching me fail. My anxiety was unbearable. It took me about a week to actually build up the courage to do the first one after I unlocked it. Then things went just about as bad as I feared. Well, at least from my perspective. Crystal Tower is really old content that many players have done literally hundreds of times. It's generally looked at as easy and boring as a result. But I was brand new to this. I had no idea what I was doing. I was late to fights, in the wrong spot. We all died multiple times. It was a mess. People started to get frustrated in chat because things were going wrong when they're not supposed to. I'm not sure how much of what was said was really serious or how much was directed at me, but I took it very personally. I felt like I was the problem, like I was the one getting yelled at. I was dragging down this entire group of 24 people. When it was finally over, I was thoroughly traumatized. I had a panic attack and quit the game for a couple weeks. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with Alliance Raids ever again, and my anxiety around dungeons and trials was only amplified. After some time had passed, and after talking to a friend, they convinced me to knock out the last 2 Alliance Raids I had to do with their assistance. I dissociated through them and moved on, finally done with this dreadful part of the game. Somewhere around this time, I decided I wanted to try being social. I've always been a quiet person that kept to myself and didn't have a whole lot of friends. But for some reason, one night I wanted to talk to some random strangers. And so I decided to stand around in one of the less populated cities and wait for someone to come talk to me. Probably not the most effective strategy, but somehow it worked. And that's how I met some of my best friends. Someone saw me standing there and thought I looked like someone else they knew, so they struck up a conversation. I was obviously not that person, but they kept talking to me and we had a really nice conversation. I ended up telling her about my experience in Crystal Tower and how it traumatized me. And she gave me some response along the lines of, "Those people were assholes, don't let it bother you," and offered to help me out in the future. And then she invited me to her free company. Final Fantasy's version of a guild. I told her I'd think about it and moved on, fully planning to blow her off and forget about the whole thing. But the next day, after reflecting on the conversation, I felt like I really wanted to be her friend. After agonizing over whether I should join or not for most of the day, I decided why not. And so I joined. And now I think it's about time I bring in some more context about myself. I am transgender, and had been grappling with my gender identity for many years at that point. I had concluded a full 10 years prior that I was a trans woman, but out of a mix of fear, self-hatred, internalized and external transphobia, I reached the conclusion that I could never act on this information. And so I spent the next 10 years hiding it, to the best of my ability, even trying to hide it from myself. But I couldn't. At least not completely. I let little hints out here and there. I exclusively played female characters in games. I picked a name for myself that I used in various games and some places online. Plenty of other little things like that. Not enough that anyone ever picked up on it, but enough that I could never forget. The thoughts would gnaw at me every single day of my life, from middle school to my post-college career. And now here I was. Anonymous, presenting as a woman, free to express and get to know people as a different version of myself. For the first time in my life, I was able to drop almost all the walls I built up. Ironically, playing behind a fake name and a character I created, I was finally able to be me. And for the first time in my life, I had people gendering me female. I vividly remember the first time someone walked over to me in a friend chatting and said, "Hello, ladies." I felt this overwhelming joy. My heart was racing. It was like an adrenaline rush, and this overall feeling of happiness. It took about 30 minutes to come down from that high. It was that intense. That was my first experience with gender euphoria, essentially the opposite of the more frequently discussed gender dysphoria. Dysphoria is a feeling of discomfort with your assigned gender. It can manifest in many different ways and have varying severity. In my opinion, this has been the focus of the transgender experience for too long, the suffering that we experience. But on the flip side of that is euphoria. It's the feeling of comfort and joy associated with your gender. Likewise, it can manifest in different ways. For me, when it's really powerful, it manifests in this overwhelming joy that turns me into a giggling mess. Within a couple weeks, I couldn't contain the feelings and started dropping hints hard to a friend of mine that I knew would be accepting. It didn't take them long to figure it out, and they even claimed they could tell just from looking at my character. After all this time, I finally had someone to confide in, someone to share these feelings with, a way to finally work through these feelings instead of keeping them locked up. The wall I built up to contain all of my emotions for the last decade collapsed. I finally had to face it. I continued to explore myself both in-game and with my friend. With this exploration and repeated moments of gender euphoria, it became increasingly clear that this was real. I hit a real low point after this. I had finally accepted something that I tried so hard to deny for so long. It was not going to be easy to overcome that. Nor would it be easy to deal with all the fears I had. For a while, I felt so hopeless. I had no hope I'd be able to come out to people I cared about. And even less hope I'd be able to transition. I suddenly felt like my entire life was a lie and was terrified of the consequences if I decided to move forward. I also felt a lot of sadness about how long it took me. Why did I try so hard to repress a vital part of myself and suffer so much as a result? I wished that I could do it all again. Transition when I was younger, before many irreversible changes happened. I felt like I had missed my chance. I felt like I had wasted so much time. I felt like I missed a huge chunk of my life. I had a lot of regrets and felt shame, both for my lack of courage at the time and for the newly accepted feelings that still felt wrong to me. I also hated that I was hiding this from all my new friends. Contrary to my expectations, I made a lot of friends in my new free company. I grew extremely close to a number of people and became one of the more active members. It was simultaneously one of the happiest times in my life and one of the darkest. I was dealing with all these difficult feelings while making wonderful new friends and experiencing a brutal back and forth of euphoria and dysphoria. I was having so much fun, but there were always fears lurking in the back of my mind. Would my friends accept me? How long can I hide this from them? Can they already tell? Around this time, I started regularly seeing a therapist for the first time in my life. I let my friends know I was having a tough time. I talked a lot about the things I felt comfortable with, but I drew a hard line for where that comfort ended. My gender was something I made sure to never mention. I made sure that the real-life friends I played with never used masculine pronouns with some improvised excuse. When I was invited to the Free Company Discord server, I made a new account so that there was no way to link it back to me. I initially ignored the voice calls, but would eventually start joining them with several layers of security. I would only use Discord on a browser where I disabled microphone access. I would then join the calls and mute myself on Discord and my physical mic. I was so worried about them hearing me that I used 3 layers of muting to feel safe. I was so scared of anyone finding out that I wasn't a real girl. I continued on that way for a few months, loving every second I spent as this unrestrained version of myself, but also feeling this guilt that I was hiding who I was. Eventually, I had enough. One member suddenly started using he/him pronouns when talking about me, and it freaked me out. I was terrified, thinking that people could tell all along. Eventually, I learned that this person just assumed everyone was a guy unless told otherwise, and I had never spoken up, so they just continued. But at the time, I was in a panic. This fear and guilt made me want to just come out already. Be honest about who I am. Let my friends in. But I couldn't bring myself to take that final step. Instead, I decided to start dropping hints. I dyed the benches at my house trans colors. I complained about being misgendered. I talked about a big secret that I couldn't talk about because I was scared how they would react. And then to my surprise, the hints actually worked. One of my friends picked up on it and even asked if I was trans. We had a great conversation, and the acceptance and encouragement I received finally gave me that push to talk to my other friends. Over the next few days, I came out to most of my close friends in the Free Company. Every single one of them was incredibly supportive. I received so many wonderful responses. It was the complete opposite of the experience I had in Crystal Tower. None of the fears I had were met this time. I was welcomed in and shown even more love than before. I had never felt so welcome and loved in my life. I had shown my true self that I had never shown to anyone before, and received nothing but love in response. In the following months, I would open up a lot more. I would actually talk on voice calls now. Not much at first, but slowly over time, I would talk more and more. I became much more social. I did everything I could to welcome new members into the Free Company so that they could have a similar experience to me. I started coming out to more and more new people. It started to get easier. I felt so free. Finally able to be myself with no judgment, with everything out in the open. I went from the quiet, nervous lizard girl in Mordona to a leader in my Free Company with a much more vibrant, happy, and social personality. It's like I was given a whole new life. The next thing I had to do was come out to people I knew in real life. It was one thing to tell people that only knew me as a girl and had no connection to me outside of a game, and an entirely different thing to tell people that have known me for years as a completely different person. The fear of rejection and also the fear of this secret spreading before I was ready made it feel impossible. For the 3rd time, I started dropping hints and hoped someone would confront me on it. I had a complete meltdown talking to a few friends and begged them to guess what was going on with me because I couldn't say it. I was too scared. To my surprise, once again, they got it. It wasn't the smoothest approach, but I had done it. I came out to 2 people in my real life, and they accepted me immediately. I continued with my life, working on these feelings, and slowly telling more and more people, starting with people I knew would have a high chance of being accepting. Some people I was concerned about surprised me with how they handled it so positively. I even started telling a few family members. At the time of writing this is where I am. I'm out to quite a few people at this point, both online and in the real world. I even had a chance to meet some of my friends from Final Fantasy in person and experience the same treatment they had always given me in-game. It's been absolutely incredible. The joy I felt when they used my name or when we talked about things I felt I never could was so powerful. One of my biggest supporters has been my sister. She's been so loving and done so much to help me, both in helping me explore, comforting me, and dispelling doubts when I have them. The first time I saw her after I came out to her, she took me to a nail salon for the first time in my life. When we left, I couldn't stop staring at my nails and smiling, and she remarked that she had never seen me so happy in my entire life. This is real. This is who I am. This is what I want. And I'm still scared. Terrified even. I have a lot of fear over how some people react, how I'll be treated by society as a whole. I fear violence and discrimination. I fear being an outsider for my entire life. But also, I fear that I would regret not doing this. I fear repressing this for longer. I fear missing out on this happiness. The joy I feel when I embrace myself is worth so much. I want to chase after that feeling. I don't want to give up on it out of fear. And I'm no longer alone. I've developed a support network, both virtually and in person, that will support me. I don't have to hide anymore. After all this time, I'm starting to feel like I can actually accept and live true to myself. At the time of recording this, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not sure if this is even going to be made into a video. And if I do make it into a video, I don't even know if I'll upload it. I guess I just wanted to have a way to remember this time in my life during the moment, instead of way down the line. I may even use it as a way to come out to people. If by any chance I do upload this video, and you are a closeted trans person, I hope that this video helps and can give you some inspiration. A lot of trans discourse I see is about the negative sides, but that's not all there is to it. Dysphoria sucks, the fears are strong, but I want to highlight the good parts of being trans as well. Gender euphoria is a wonderful thing. The joy is real. Being who you truly are is beautiful. The feeling of freedom, happiness, and comfort is not something you should give up on. No matter how scary, no matter how difficult it may be. Maybe now is not the right time for you. Maybe your current living situation or where you live is not safe. But there's absolutely no reason to hide it from yourself. I talked about regretting not transitioning earlier, but in hindsight, it was the decision I had to make. I chose what would keep me safe at the time. And now when I am older and have more freedom to choose for myself, I can return to those feelings and face them. In an ideal world, I would have dealt with this at the time, but I don't think it was realistic. I don't think the people around me would have been ready for it. But more importantly, deep down, I also know I wasn't ready. Everyone has a different timeline. Life isn't a race. There's no such thing as being too late to chase your dreams. I now find myself at a point where I have full autonomy over my life. I have a support network of people that care. I have the ability to support myself. Now, I am ready. When the credits of Endwalker finally rolled, all I could think about was how far I had come. About all the highs and lows I've had in my time here. From the anxiety over playing new content, the joy of gender euphoria, the dread, fear, and guilt around coming out. The wonderful friends I made and could confide in, the triumph of accepting myself and sharing it with people. So much has happened, so much has changed. I've grown so much. About 6 months after my initial experience with Crystal Tower, I finally revisited it with a different perspective. I was now an experienced and more confident player, and I was blown away. This place that had given me so much grief now seems so insignificant, so easy. It hit me in that moment just how far I had come since that initial experience. This game and these people are near and dear to my heart, and I am so incredibly grateful for all that they have given me. I'm so thankful that this game let me create a new version of myself and go out into the world as this new me in a safe environment. It let me get a taste of what life could be like and help me learn who I am. I don't know what my future will hold. I don't know if I'm going to transition or not, whether I will pursue hormone replacement therapy or not. But now, I know who I am, and I know that I'm on the right path. A path to my freedom and happiness, to fulfillment. I know there's going to be many hardships along the way, but I fully believe I'm going to get there. And when I do, I can't wait to share it with all of you.